If you've ever lain awake doing math in your head, adding up what you owe, subtracting what you fear you'll lose, multiplying every small mistake into a disaster, this story is for you. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from never feeling like you have enough, no matter how much you actually hold. It isn't about the number in your account. It's about a question you've never let yourself ask out loud. Today, I want to tell you about a monk who was asked that question directly by a merchant who thought he already knew the answer. The merchant expected pity or excuse or some vague spiritual dodge. What he got instead was 7 words. 7 words that the merchant carried with him for the rest of his life, and that, if you let them, will follow you home tonight too. But to understand why those 7 words landed the way they did, you need to understand who was asking and why he needed the answer so badly. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what's the one money worry that follows you everywhere, the one that shows up even on good days? You might be surprised how many people carry the exact same one quietly, thinking they're the only one. The village sat at the base of a mountain, where the road from the capital narrowed into a dirt path, and travelers stopped to rest before the final climb. It was the kind of place merchants passed through rather than lived in. A waypoint, a place to water the horses and count the money made in the last town before counting the money to be made in the next. The monastery sat above it, small and unremarkable, a handful of low buildings with tiled roofs the color of wet stone, and a courtyard where an old fig tree dropped its fruit onto packed earth. The merchant's name was Han Wei, though the story that survives him doesn't dwell on his name so much as his weight. Not physical weight, but the weight he carried. He had built his fortune over 30 years, starting with a single cart of dyed silk and ending with warehouses in 4 cities. He owned more than any man in 3 counties, and yet he had not slept a full night in longer than he could remember. He would wake at the hour before dawn with his mind already running numbers. What he owed the silk weavers in the north, what a rival was rumored to be planning, whether the flood season would ruin the shipment currently crossing the river. He was, by every visible measure, an extraordinarily successful man. He was also, privately, a man who checked and rechecked his ledgers the way some people check a wound, unable to stop touching the place that hurts. This will likely sound familiar to you, even if your ledgers look nothing like his. Maybe you don't own warehouses. Maybe your version is a banking app you open compulsively, hoping the number will have grown since you last looked, dreading that it hasn't. Han Wei's fear had a larger shape than most people's, but it was built from the same material. The belief that safety was a number, and that number was never quite large enough. He had heard from a business partner who traveled through the mountain village about a monk who lived above the town with nothing. No coin, no land, no possessions beyond a robe, a bowl, and a mat to sleep on. The partner had meant it as an oddity, a strange local story to pass the time over dinner. But Han Wei couldn't stop thinking about it. A man with nothing. How did he not lie awake in terror? Han Wei, who had everything, lay awake in terror every night. There had to be some trick to it, some secret the monk knew that Han Wei didn't. And so, on his way back from the capital, he left the road early and climbed the path to the monastery, telling himself he was merely curious, though something more urgent than curiosity was pulling him up that hill. He arrived in the late afternoon, dust on his boots, and found the monk sitting beneath the fig tree, mending a tear in his robe with slow, unhurried stitches. The monk didn't rise to greet him with the formality Han Wei was used to from other men his own wealth entitled him to. He simply looked up, gestured to the ground beside him, and kept sewing. Han Wei sat, uninvited by protocol, but somehow entirely welcomed, and for a while neither of them spoke. The silence unsettled him more than conversation would have. He was used to rooms where silence meant a deal was falling apart, where he had to fill the space or lose the advantage. Here, the silence simply sat, comfortable and unbothered, and Han Wei realized he didn't know what to do with a silence that wasn't a negotiation. Finally, unable to hold it any longer, he asked the question that had climbed the mountain with him. "You have nothing," he said. "No coin, no land, no store of grain for winter. Tell me, why are you poor?" But what Han Wei didn't know was that this question had been asked of the monk many times before by many different travelers, and the monk had learned that the question itself revealed more about the asker than any answer ever could. Every man who climbed that hill to ask it was really asking about himself. The monk set down his needle. He looked at Han Wei for a long moment, not appraising his clothes or his obviously expensive boots, but looking at his face the way you'd look at someone you were trying to help find something they'd lost. And this is where everything changed, though Han Wei wouldn't understand that yet. The monk didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked one back. "How many silk warehouses do you own?" Han Wei, surprised, answered honestly, "Or 4. "And how many of them do you think about while you fall asleep?" Han Wei opened his mouth, then closed it. He thought about all 4, every night, without fail. "And when you wake," the monk continued, "how many of your 4 warehouses do you check on, in your mind before you've even opened your eyes?" All 4 again, every single one. Han Wei felt something in his chest tighten, the way it did when a debtor was late on payment, except there was no debtor here. Only this quiet man with his mending needle, asking questions that felt less like conversation and more like a slow unwinding of rope. Remember this detail. It matters later. The monk had not yet answered Han Wei's original question. He had spent the entire exchange asking Han Wei about himself. Han Wei, so used to being the one who extracted information, hadn't noticed that the transaction had been entirely reversed. "I have 1 bowl," the monk finally said. "I think about it perhaps once a day when I am hungry, and once more when I wash it. That is the whole of my relationship with what I own. You have 4 warehouses, and you think of them from the moment you wake until the moment sleep finally takes you. And even then, I suspect, you dream of them too." He paused. "Now tell me, which of us is poor?" Han Wei felt the question land somewhere below his ribs. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say that of course he wasn't poor, that poverty was empty hands and empty stomachs, that the monk was twisting words to win a point the way clever men sometimes did. But he found he couldn't argue, because the monk hadn't twisted anything. He had simply asked Han Wei to look honestly at where his mind lived, and Han Wei's mind, it turned out, lived entirely inside 4 warehouses full of silk, guarding them the way a starving dog guards a bone it doesn't trust anyone not to steal. "I don't understand," Han Wei admitted, and this admission cost him something, because men like him did not admit to not understanding. "I have worked 30 years for what I have. Are you telling me it was worthless?" "I'm not telling you that at all," the monk said, and his voice was gentle now, without any trace of the challenge from before. "Your warehouses are not the problem. Your fear of losing them is the problem. And this is a very important difference, because one of those things you built with your own hands, and the other has been quietly building you, brick by brick, for 30 years, until you no longer notice the walls." He resumed his stitching, as though the weight of what he'd just said needed no further emphasis, needed to simply sit in the air and be felt, rather than explained. Han Wei stayed a long while in silence, watching the fig tree's shadow lengthen across the courtyard, feeling, for the first time in longer than he could remember, something other than the low hum of financial dread in his chest. It wasn't peace exactly. It was more like the first crack of light through a door he hadn't realized was shut. Before he left, standing to go, brushing the dust from his robes, though there was no real reason to, Han Wei asked one more time, quieter now, less like a challenge and more like a man asking for something he genuinely needed. "Then tell me plainly, why are you poor?" The monk looked up at him one final time, and this time he answered directly, without a question in return, without deflection. He said only this: "I have exactly as much as I need, and not one thing more." 7 words. Han Wei repeated them on the walk back down the mountain, then on the road home, then in the quiet hour before dawn, when his mind used to run its familiar circuit of warehouses and debts and rivals. "I have exactly as much as I need, and not one thing more." It wasn't a rejection of wealth. The monk hadn't asked him to give anything away, hadn't shamed him for what he owned. He had simply named the difference between having enough and fearing you never will, and shown Han Wei, without a single lecture, which side of that line he had been living on for 30 years. Here is the truth underneath this story, the one the parable is really about. That merchant is you, Every time you refresh your banking app, hoping the number will finally make you feel safe. And it never quite does, because the fear was never really about the number. It was about a mind that has confused having enough with having no possible way to lose. Those are not the same thing, though they feel identical at 3 in the morning. Han Wei owned 4 warehouses and still felt poor, because his relationship to money had become one of vigilance instead of gratitude, of guarding instead of using, of counting instead of living. This is the one philosophical thread worth pulling on tonight. Sufficiency. Not abundance, not minimalism, not renunciation, simply the quiet, almost radical idea that you might already have enough, and that the anxious checking, the mental warehouse tours at 3 a.m. might be adding nothing to your safety at all. They might only be adding to your exhaustion. This isn't a story that asks you to give away your possessions or pretend money doesn't matter. Money matters. Warehouses matter. Han Wei's 30 years of work were not wasted, and neither are yours. What the monk was pointing at wasn't the wealth itself, but the relationship to it. Whether it sits in your hands or lives in your chest, whether you own it or it owns you, one sleepless calculation at a time. So tonight, before you close your eyes, here are 3 small things worth doing, not as a program to fix your finances, but as a way of loosening the grip the fear has on you. First, take out a piece of paper, an actual piece of paper, not your phone, and write down 3 things money cannot buy that you already own. Not abstractions, specific things. The particular way afternoon light falls through your window, a friend who answers the phone at midnight, the fact that you woke up this morning at all. This isn't a gratitude exercise for its own sake. It's a way of proving to your own mind in writing that your worth was never only ever a balance sheet. Second, choose one financial worry, just one, the loudest one. And instead of solving it tonight, simply name it out loud, alone in your room. I am afraid I will not have enough for retirement. I am afraid the market will fall. Say it plainly, the way Han Wei finally said his question plainly. Fear loses some of its power the moment it stops living only in the dark, unspoken corners of your mind and becomes a sentence you can actually look at. Third, tomorrow, before you check your accounts, pause for 10 seconds and ask yourself Han Wei's question in reverse. Not, why am I poor, but what, right now, in this exact moment, do I actually need? Not want, need. You will likely find the honest answer is smaller than the fear suggests, and that gap between what you fear you need and what you actually need is exactly where your peace has been hiding this whole time. Picture the monk now, in the last light of that afternoon, the fig tree's shadow stretched long across the courtyard, his needle moving slowly through worn cloth, his bowl resting empty and unguarded by the door because there was nothing in it worth guarding. He never asked Han Wei to become him. He only asked Han Wei to notice the difference between a man with 4 warehouses and a mind that never rests, and a man with 1 bowl and a mind entirely at ease. In his own words, offered freely to a stranger who climbed a mountain out of fear. I have exactly as much as I need and not one thing more. And beneath that, the truth this whole story was built to carry to you. The one worth writing down. The one worth remembering the next time your chest tightens over a number on a screen. It is not the size of what you hold that determines your peace. It is whether your hands have learned to hold it loosely. If this story gave you even one moment of that peace, there are more waiting for you here. Next time, I'll tell you about the king who traded his crown for a single night of sleep and what he asked for in return when he woke. Until then, walk gently, hold loosely.